Tannel and Kris up here, and we'll applaud for them in a quick second. I want to just do a brief introduction. So again, Kris and I have had the privilege of doing ministry together for a while now, and I can't remember how I heard about Kris. Somebody just recommended, hey, you got to go talk to this guy, and he has been an incredible resource. He's a friend of Purpose Church. He's supported us. In fact, during the pandemic, he made himself available to do a free counseling session with any of our staff members at Purpose Church, just because he cares so much about the local church and the leaders in the church. And so many of our staff members took him up on that. So Kris and I have been able to have a great partnership. He's actually Sarah and I's marriage counselor, so that's been amazing. So, yeah, right. So anything going well, you can thank him. Anything going bad, thank him, I guess. I don't know. But he's just been an incredible person in our lives. And then he introduced us to Tannel. And Tannel has been such a gift getting to know you. Tannel and Christina Dway in the back right there partnered together on an event for our high school students last year, which is amazing. It was called A Night of Hope, and they shared about, Christina shared her story. Christina made a 21-day devotional for those experiencing anxiety and depression, and Tannel helped out with that, and that was incredible. And then Tannel and I got to co-preach together in the middle of the pandemic, and that was just an awesome time to hear her wisdom and experience and to give us some insight. So these are two people who are friends of Purpose Church. They love Jesus. They love having these kind of conversations and equipping leaders from a biblical perspective, from a psychological perspective. So I, again, am so excited for our time together. One more time, can you thank Kris and Tannel for being here?
Hello. Probably where we're going to start is with Tannel. I've been working with Tannel for, about 10 years now. We actually used to have 4 counselors. 2 of them moved out of state. Now it's just Tannel and I, and I'm not really planning on doing more than she takes care of everything. So with teens, she's the go-to. One of the things I've learned about myself, I do about half of my people that I see are couples, and marriages and things like that. Half of them are individuals. And I stopped doing teens because there are people who do teens better than I do. There are people, Tannel is just so much better at drawing them out and being able to kind of speak into their life. So let me go ahead and hand this off to you, Tannel, and you can start things off.
Thank you, Kris. Thank you, Pastor Eric. Thank you, Purpose Church, for inviting us back again. This is such a great opportunity to be here, to share, to bring about awareness. And one of the things that you guys have always been strong about is how can we change the myth? How can we change what we think about the church? And so I know when I personally experience through one church that is constantly spreading awareness on the first step and the rest of it. Once they know that you are aware and they're comfortable talking about it, comfortable sharing it, they're going to flock to you. They're going to come to you for that support. So let's just make sure that this training goes into not the recording, but the announcement. This training takes place goes into the announcements. Because as soon as they hear that you are equipped, they're going to come to you. And that's the first step and the best thing to do for population. Okay? So, moving on from there, I would like to start off by saying if you have any questions, we don't want this to be so formal to where it's just like that, just listen. We want you to engage, ask questions as you go along. But I want to kind of start off with talking about a couple of mental health disorders that you may see with the population that you serve. Anxiety, depression, suicidality, eating disorders, and self-harm. But before I get started, I'm going to ask for 10 volunteers. I'm just going to pick you randomly. I just want you to stand up and point if you don't mind. You right here, Purpose Church glasses. Right here with the hat on backwards. Right here. Let's see. Over here with the black shirt, glasses. Yeah. The rose shirt. 1, 2. He's not even looking at me. That's the one. That wasn't to put him on blast. That was just kind of to highlight this. It was like, do not come. Gentleman right here with the glasses, blue shirt, under. Oh, is that the office?
There it is. Come on. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I need 3 more. pink shirt, I'm sorry, yeah, you. On the end, 2, and you. Ready? Yeah, you. Okay. So first, I just want you to stand here really quick, and then I'm going to have you come up here and just share what you think about it. Okay, everyone has a seat. What I would like for you to do is share how you felt in that moment. It's so real. We all experience anxiety. We all experience it. But the difference is when it gets to the place where it enables you to function and to do what you need to do, that's when help is required. So I do want to know, some of you was like, some of you guys were mad. Like, this is not right. Some of you guys were pretty upset. We're just calm. So with anxiety, you're going to see some anger. You're going to see some frustration. Some of you were like, oh, can you just eat my pizza? We were annoying. If anybody feels comfortable sharing how you felt, please do. No pressure at all. But I did want to demonstrate to you that we all experience anxiety. And that was a moment of anxiety, right? Anybody want to share? And that's quite all right. The other thing I want to highlight with anxiety is what you felt for that moment. A person who's struggling feels that continuously. It's non-stop. So one of my goals today is to provoke a level of empathy and compassion that compels you to move on their behalf. Be it praying, be it fasting, be in a support system. Because it's just as draining for them. Okay? So anxiety. We'll probably talk a little bit about that later on, so we'll see how time goes. The next thing I want to kind of talk about is depression. Depression is a feeling of hopelessness, it's isolation, it's sadness, pervasive sadness. And a lot of times we'll see this, and in some individuals you might miss it because it may come across as anger. But a lot of times you'll see this and we are not sure what to do with this sadness. But most of the times individuals who struggle with depression have some level of thought of suicide. And sometimes it may not come out as I'm feeling suicidal, but what they might say is, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting tired. And these are the things you just want to pay attention to so you can give them the help that they need. Most of this is going to say, make sure you're equipped so you can give them the help that they need. The help that would be best would be referring them to your team leaders, Pastor Eric, myself, Kris, as a resource for therapy as well. The other thing I want to highlight, if you feel that the suicide is already at the point of where they're trying to attempt or want to attempt, I'm going to ask you to call the hospital, call 911, because the time that it'll take for them to get to us is the process. If they're thinking about it, you want to get them help. While we're here on suicide, that was a smooth transition from depression to suicide. But the truth is, they're very close. You're likely to see suicide or ideation with depression. I do want to give you the National Prevention Hotline number really quick. And that's 1-800-273-TALK. 1-825-500. If they're hearing impaired, you want to dial 711 and then 1-800-number. You want to give this number if the person is saying, I just feel sad, I feel like I'm tired. Because you're going to call and it's going to be a hotline, so you don't have to wait for a person to get on the call. If it's a crisis immediate, then you want to get them in front of the person. Okay? Any questions so far? With suicide, there's a couple things you also want to look at when you're talking to an individual. So you have the ideation, you have the attempt, and you have the completion. Ideation is those thoughts. There's constant thoughts about doing it. Attempt, a plan has been put into action. They actually had a plan and they follow through with that plan. And completion is they had an attempt and they lost their life as a result. So anytime a person is coming to you saying, I'm feeling suicidal, or I don't know if I'm going to live, I don't know if I'm going to live anymore, take every one of them serious. You may be the first and last person to talk to. And I heard they came back 10 times. You take it serious. One of the risk factors is if they have a previous history of attacks, previous history of ideations. So you just want to take it all serious when someone's speaking about suicide versus addiction. With suicide, is the second leading cause of death for the ages of 15 to 35. The second leading cause of death. The numbers have gone up, and I'm going to say this with respect, because I'm a believer first. I'm a therapist second. And so my goal, my desire is salvation. Is your soul, can your soul be saved? And if your soul can be saved, then I'll do everything I can. Although I am a professional, so there's certain things that as a professional I cannot cross the line with. But I can pray and fast for you all day. But our LGBTQ community, suicide is gone up. Now we can call it the community, or we can say those souls. Those are souls who are waiting to be saved. And some of them are in the church. And this cannot be the place they're afraid to go next, right? And so we want to make sure that the resources are available to them. And you may be a resource because their parents may be believers. And the kid is caught up in a world that we all didn't have to live in. It's totally different. But they still deserve an opportunity. And so I might not be the professional to give them therapy on that particular topic. I'd be the first to say that. But there are individuals who are equipped to do that. I don't know if you know that, Kris, but if I do, I would definitely send them your way, for sure. Because they're here. Let's see. Just get back to my notes here. I think that's about suicidality, self-harm, carving, cutting. A lot of times when you have an individual who's cutting and carving, they're going to use a sharp object, typically any type of hard piece of plastic, a safety pin, a staple. It's going to be something they can hide that they can use anytime they want to. You'll see long sleeves when it's hot. Okay, I didn't carve it, guys. It's not that. But you'll see long sleeves when it's hot. And so a lot of times you just want to ask them, have you had thoughts of harming yourself? Do you want to harm yourself? Have you had thoughts of killing yourself? Those questions are not going to prompt them to want to hurt themselves. Those questions are going to tell them that it's okay to have this conversation. And that's what's important. What I'm seeing more today is individuals are carving on their upper thigh because they can pull your sleeve up, but you're not going to question about the leg. So you definitely want to ask them, do you think about it, do you talk about it? Make it a safe place for them to come back to you and just affirm their experience. I've also noticed that they're doing it in groups. So chances are if you have a group of young individuals who are doing that, there's another one that they hang out this close with who's aware who is doing it also. Now that's just personal experience that I've seen that I'm sharing on that particular topic as far as carving. So I would just encourage you to make it a safe place for them to share about their carving and about their hurting themselves. And a lot of times it's done because they don't know what to do with the feelings they're experiencing. Anytime you hear somebody say they're numb, just, that's a red flag. Just pull them aside and ask them, how are you doing? Don't go straight in. How are you doing? How are your relationships with your friends? How are your relationships with, are you in a relationship? I talked to one person for I don't know how long, well, it wasn't that long, but I'm sure. And I didn't ask about the relationship. And come to find out the stressor is coming from a relationship that they were having. So ask about relationships. Ask them how are they doing. Ask them, are they happy? Do they feel safe? These are important questions to at least put them in the right direction. Another one, younger group, but it goes, I think, about to 13, 14, hitting themselves in the face and pulling their hair out. You'll see that as a way to express it's self-harm, but they're still dealing with their frustration, not knowing how to deal with it. And as we move on, you realize there's stress, anxiety, depression, self-harm. They're all a result of some level of stress that's manifested somewhere in their life. Anxiety or depression. Did I talk about eating disorders? Okay, so the other one that I want to cover that you may very well see, again, is eating disorders. Two of the common ones, two of them eating disorders. There is one not otherwise specified, but two of the common slow down, Tannel. Disorders is anorexia and bulimia. So when you're looking at anorexia, you're looking at a person who is not eating in fear of gaining weight. It's really about body image. So they're trying to keep their body image a certain way. Any amount of density on their body to them is magnified. To everyone else, they're emaciated, they're frail, but to them, it's magnified. You'll also notice a slow speech when they're communicating with you. They're further along in the disorder. And very slow blinking with their eyes as far as the engagement. It is a process. They don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm not going to eat. It's a process. So given that you have the opportunity to be around these individuals for a longer period of time, part of it is just making sure you're watching what they're eating. Just being aware. And being okay with having that conversation with someone is paying attention. A lot of times they fly on the radar and they continue, and it kind of feeds into their behavior. And we notice that. Just keep with us. The other one is bulimia. Bulimia is, again, it's about body image, but the individual regurgitates, takes laxative, or works out excessively. I'm talking about just someone who has to go to the gym. This person eats and they feel like they have to be in the gym to take the calories off, and they're working excessively to where it's unhealthy. And so those are other things you want to look at. Again, you are around the population. And so if you're sitting there with your group, and every time Tannel eats, within 15 minutes, she's gone. One, she may have a good system. But two, it could be that she's beginning to regurgitate, and the habit of after the food gets into their stomach, it's like instant. They have to go there. And so you want to be aware of that. Start asking questions. How are they doing? How's your relationship? Ask these questions first so they get comfortable spending that time with you and know that it's a safe place. Any questions there? Check it there. Eating disorders. Let's see. Any questions from anyone? That was a lot. Okay. If anything comes back up for me, I'm sure to share it with you. Okay. But I think these are important things to look out for the population we serve, age from 15 to 35. Things to look out for. Depression is going to be key for our high school students, mostly because of the transition. Basically, senior year, like you said, graduates, so that's probably college and adults. Their transition was tough. Their transition was tough, as was everyone else's. When I was here early this year, we talked about culture shock and the adjustment that they go through, that we all went through with COVID. And here we are going through another adjustment. Kids are back in school, except for those who graduated. Some of them made it to college because the college was still open, but it was a big challenge for that population. And so I think another thing that would be helpful is the community that you guys are establishing for those individuals. Okay, I think I'm done, Kris. And yes and no. So with anxiety and depression, one of the symptoms is your eating habits will change. You're either going to eat more or you're going to eat less. Same thing with your sleeping. You're going to sleep more or sleep less. So if you notice a drastic drop in weight, chances are eating has been affected. If you notice a huge gain in weight, eating can be a factor. A lot of people eat to comfort, and we kind of overlook that, but if we focus on why they're eating, then we're going to get to the issue of possibly depression or anxiety. So yes.
Hang on to the microphone because you might need to jump in. But I can't answer a question. I worked youth groups in my church for about 7 years. Loved youth group, really enjoyed it. We, my wife and I are a blended family. My first wife passed away, and then I remarried. I brought 3 little kids into it. She brought 2 kids into it. And then we had 5 teenagers at the same time. And one of the things I tell parents of teenagers is that you choose to like teenagers. They will do everything in their power to make you not like them. And you have to choose to like them anyway. And so living in a house with 5 teenagers, you think, you don't know if they've got the mental disorder you do. But you know somebody does. And that's just every day. And so teasing out the emotionality of teenagers that's just normal versus like what's actually something that's a problem. And so one of the things that I really like to do is whenever talking about mental disorders, I like to put them on a 0 to 10 scale. That you can have a little bit of it, you can have a lot of it. You can be a little bit blue, a little bit down, or you can be really depressed and suicidal and can't get out of bed. You can be a little bit emotional, and you can be bipolar and just totally off the charts. You can have a little bit of schizophrenia, where you have a thought disorder and you're just a little quirky. And then you can be like off the charts kind of thought disorder things, with hallucinations and delusions and things like that. And so it goes back and forth with people. There are times when we have felt a little bit down, and there's times when it's been exacerbated by a lot of things that are going on in our life that have got way worse. And then there are other times when we're able to really cope and really step up in some way and change things, and we got better. And so when we're looking at mental disorders, I just want you to recognize that by coming alongside people, we can help slide it to the place where things are better, where they have more support, they have more help, they have more encouragement. And so I got something that I from a health research journal, and what it said specifically about teens. It says the COVID-19 outbreak and lockdown may have multiple consequences in the lives of adolescents. Chronic and acute stress, worry for their families, unexpected bereavements, sudden school breaks, home confinement in many countries, increased time of access to the internet and social media, which is a problem, worry for the economic future of their family and country, social relationships are disrupted, individuals are staying at home, wearing masks is becoming more and more common in some countries where people are not used to it, individuals no longer see each other's facial expressions. For adolescents with psychiatric disorders, lockdown may result in a sudden break or shift in care. That's from a French hospital university study. It's the same thing that's happening here. It's the same thing that's happening all over the world. That this additional distress is huge. They did a survey of parents. Now, when you look at the actual hospitalization of adolescents, it's about 5 in 1,000 every year, right? And so it's not a huge number, but it is a very prevalent number. If you have 1,000 kids in your youth group, if you have 1,000 people in your church, 5 of them are going to a psych hospital. If somebody, let's say, tries and completes suicide, it has this ripple effect that's just huge. A few years ago, before the pandemic, in Rancho Cucamonga, 4 kids committed suicide in a month, all in the same school district. And the ripple effect was unreal. And it was in September, like right at the beginning of school, and they were under all this huge pressure. And so the being able to say, before that kid gets that far, maybe we can step in and help a little bit. Now that's just basically that's 0.5%, right? But yet 46% of parents have noticed that their adolescent is struggling more than they used to, have new mental disorders, or that their mental disorders have gotten worse. 46%. So now we get the difference between 0.5% and 46%. That's where we live. And can we kind of come alongside and say, we're here for you. We would love to be there to help you, to lift you up. Now, one of the ways that, I kind of tripped and fell into this, before I was a therapist, I was at my church, and they get a team of people at the end of service that will go up and pray for people who want to go up to the altar and get prayed for, right? I had zero training. At that time, I had a swimming pool store in Moreno Valley, and so we're talking about 30 years ago, and I'm praying for this guy, and he says, "Hey, my wife's kind of in a hard place. Can you go to my house and pray for my wife?" I didn't care. Sure, I'm happy to do that, right? I think my church has rules against this now. I wouldn't be surprised if your church has rules against this too. But I go to this guy's house, and his wife is in extreme distress. She is hysterical. She is sobbing. She can't get it together. She has taken a tumbler of water, has crushed a whole bunch, like a whole bottle of sleeping pills, poured them into the water, is threatening to drink the whole thing. And of course, I'm just some dumb guy who came to church and thought I was going to pray for her. So it's like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Well, we need to get her in the presence of somebody who's got a higher, a little bit higher training than I've got. And so, first thing we did, we checked insurance and said, what hospital do we take her to? Found out what's on her, and that was kind of a key thing. What's the hospital? What's her doctor say? She had a psychiatrist, got a hold of him on a Sunday. He said, I've got visiting privileges at this hospital. You go to this one. Okay, cool. We did all the phone calls ahead of time so that we could walk in and they would kind of be expecting her. Because if you've ever gone to a hospital that has no open beds, it's kind of a difficult thing. And so the husband, I figured out later, was a big part of the problem, right? I'm in my car, excuse me, following them down to the hospital. And every time they'd stop for a light, I could see him from behind the steering wheel lean over and start really going after her, and I could see her kind of going back against the window. And I'm thinking, I can't leave him alone with her in the hospital because he's really worried that he's going to look bad. That's really the thing that was motivating him, much more than his wife's well-being. And so I went, waited in the waiting room, sat with them for like 4 or 5 hours, took her in the back, right? And at first I'm in the, this was before San Antonio Hospital had all the, like locking doors and stuff like that. I thought, you know what, if he dominates in the waiting room, or in the emergency room the way he did, elsewhere, she's not gonna say how bad she is. And so I snuck back, got in the room with them. When they came to get evaluated, I made sure it came out about the bottle of pills in the water and how severe this was. And so she was checked into the hospital. Happy ending is every week I would see her raising her hands and praising God because she got better. And as pro-marriage as I am, I'm happy she left him. Because she had to get strong in order to leave him, in order to protect herself and be okay. And so, being somebody who's willing to step in the gap, it took about 7 hours one day. And I have gone to hospitals with people, and every time it has taken me a bunch of hours. And one of the things I've figured out is that if you ever have to go down that road with somebody, call ahead. Find out if they've got insurance. If they don't have insurance, don't be afraid to take them to county. People talk bad about county. County's okay, right? County is so much better than doing nothing. And somebody's gonna either evaluate them, and then they're gonna give them referrals, or evaluate them and give them medication, send them home, or evaluate them and keep them and make sure they're safe, right? Is that ideal? No, it's awful. You know, I worked at Canyon Ridge Psychiatric Hospital for a lot of years. And for about 8 of those years, I did a Bible study. And you would see people coming in like the really worst moment of their life, but they needed to take a break. They just needed somebody to care enough to say, we're just not going to let you be alone with your own thoughts anymore. Because when it starts to get really dark, that's what it is. You just have way too much time to think. And you go down this really dark road, and it just gets worse and worse. And so, for that, you know, in the times I've had a bad experience doing that is when they didn't have insurance. And I'm in the waiting room of the wrong hospital that doesn't want to see them because they don't have insurance, or they don't have any beds. And we waited out there like 8 hours without anybody even talking to us. You know, and so it's like, okay, I get the message. We need to go where we can get help. But like I say, for most of these people, that's not where it's going to go. For most of these people, it's going to be a process of, we're going to go from us to our team leader, to our pastor, to a referral list, to possibly a psychiatrist, to possibly, you know, but it's like, there are a lot of steps in between. And we don't have to go all the way to, you know, the worst possible outcome. And even the worst possible one is one that's meant to save people. And people who, you know, that's been their experience will tell you they hated it, but it probably helped. Because it took what was in the dark and brought it into the light. And so, you know, there's an old saying in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're only as sick as your secrets. And so getting out of the secrets place, getting into the place where you can now talk openly about this thing that's been in between my ears for so long. You know, and so I'm going to give you a vignette and just kind of throw it out there and let you guys give me suggestions what you think would be a good thing to do, a good thing to ask. You know, what would your next step be? What questions would you ask? And so we got a 15-year-old young man. He's dropped off by his parents for youth group. He doesn't want to be there, and he makes no secret about it. He's hostile and belligerent. He's unpredictable. Sometimes he'll be off to the side muttering to himself. Other times he's talking about how bad his parents and how bad his teachers are. Sometimes he's picking fights with other guys. Several girls have complained about the inappropriate things he said to them. What's your next step? You kind of see this kid right here, and you want to just write him off. You want to just smack him, you know. You know you can't do this. But what do you do? Because we're the church, right? We're the ones who love people who are not lovable, you know. Any thoughts? What are your thoughts? Yes, sir.
Sounds like you know my guys at HSM. Seriously, I think what I do is, you know, I think my intent would be to show some kind of love and interest in how they're doing and trying to get into his level and ask him questions, engage him. And the idea of getting him to talk to me. And I think he just needs to feel comfortable and want to feel like he's you know, in an accepted place. And so I think that would be my initial approach.
And so that would be a great way to come in and recognize that he has value. And he has value enough that somebody wants to know his story. So what other thoughts do you guys might have? Now, one thing is if he doesn't connect with one person, have somebody else circle back and talk to him. And then somebody else circle back and talk to him. Somebody else, you know, so that if he rejects the first three, he might actually talk to somebody. And sometimes you just sit next to him quiet, and you just kind of wait and see if he says something. What else do you do? Because you can't just leave him alone with all the girls, right? You can't just leave him as part of your population because you are, he's creating a problem for everybody else who just wants to come and worship God, right? So now, do you have any idea what this might be caused by? Any thoughts, like if you were to do a diagnosis of some kind, what would you speculate could be a reason? I'm sorry? Schizophrenia? Okay, so you picked up on the muttering off to the side by himself, right? Yeah.
Problems at home.
Problems at home?
ADHD.
ADHD? Yeah, can't be. Any other thoughts? So a lot of times ADHD kids are the brightest kids who think they're the dumbest. They are the ones who, because they struggle with the whole sit down and shut up part of school, are always in trouble and they start seeing themselves that way. They struggle with completing assignments, so they always get bad grades, so they just, by extension, think they're dumb. And so that often comes into like depression. And with adults, a lot of times depression, we get sad. With teens, a lot of times they get irritable. And so these irritable teens can be a real problem. Now, one of the things when you go into, into mental diagnoses, because people will go down the road of like intermittent explosive disorder, kind of things like that. And there's an old saying in the medical community, if you hear hoofbeats behind you, don't think zebras, think horses. And if you've ever heard that, it's just, what's the most common thing? Because if you hear hoofbeats, chances are it's not going to be a zebra. And so if you start thinking about it, you start thinking, it may have a problem with drugs, right? Because sometimes we see the kind of chaotic behavior and we start thinking mental disorders. And actually, a lot of times, there's a thing called medication-induced psychosis. And they're finding that things like even the pot, the marijuana is so strong now that people are going into full psychotic episodes, delusionals, hallucinations, all kinds of stuff. And so they need treatment in order to kind of wean them off of the medication that's sending them off in a wacky place. Things like people who do meth can often be very aggressive, can be very paranoid, a lot of things. And so it's like, okay, how do we know what we're dealing with? We don't. We're not equipped on youth night to diagnose what's wrong. But one of the things that I always like to fall back on is that 99.9% of the parents love their kids and want the best for them. And so if there is somebody who knows this kid's parents, especially somebody who already has a pretty warm connection with them, say, hey, we're worried about it. What do you notice? And ask a lot more questions than make statements. Does that make sense? So any other thoughts or questions before I want to give you guys just like a couple of minutes for a quick break and then, yes sir?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Chris. You kind of briefly just mentioned like social media. And I was wondering, do you guys have any data or thoughts on the correlation between social media and anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses?
Well, I had a 19-year-old girl in my office the other day, and she's historically depressed, anxious, all these things. And she lives on social media. And I said, okay, you know what? Let me ask if you may play this game. You post a picture of yourself, and then all your friends say, beautiful, model, gorgeous, all that. And she said, yeah. And do you count the likes and the comments? Yeah. And if there's a number underneath it, then you feel bad that you didn't get the high enough number? Yeah. And I said, is there now if a really high number of people like your picture, do you actually feel better about yourself? No. Why not? Because I know it's not real. I do it for them, they do it for me. It's just, you do it because you're supposed to, not because you really believe it. So I don't really believe that they like my picture. I just think they're going through the motions. But if you don't get it, it drops your self-image. If you do get it, it doesn't boost your self-image. You give me a scenario where you win in here. Because there's no win. And that's the more time we're exposing ourselves to a situation where we can't win, the more time we start to feel hopeless. And that there's really no point. So data, no. But I think that's kind of the way so much of that works. Yes.
I was just gonna say.
You want to share with Kris? Yes.
I was just gonna add that, with social media, no, I don't have specific data or statistics, but it is one of the biggest problems when individuals come in, even couples, married couples. He liked somebody's post on Facebook, and it will cause a big problem in a relationship. And so with that, yes, I believe as time goes on, we're gonna see privacy diagnosis, and this is just to know with social media, the impact that it has on our children and relationships. I think it'd be really cool if Purpose Church did a social media fast. But I say that just because the kids have to learn how to do it right now. They don't know how to not do it. It's all they know. I grew up where we had pagers. Atari. So these kids, I have my niece, she's only 1 and she can scroll. How do you know to scroll through a phone? So this is all these kids know. This generation is all they know. So I'm saying it would be really good if we could begin to set the tone for them that we don't have to live on this device.
Yeah, whenever I want somebody to know how old I am, I always point out that when I was in junior high school, we didn't have a computer lab, we had a calculator lab. Because the very first calculators came out, and they didn't want anybody to get out of junior high school without having laid their hands on one once. And all they did was add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Computers were still a long way out. So yeah, that's why I send those the generations into now. So listen, let me give you guys just like 5-10 minutes, just take a quick break, and then we will come back. Tannel's going to talk a little bit more about specifically suicide and depression. Okay? See you in a couple minutes.
Guys, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to maximize our time with Tannel and Kris. So we'll be back at 2:10. 5-minute break.
Thanks, Tannel.
Yeah. Could be.
You get your pizza? Got one for you. I'm tired of cooking. I almost got a pizza by myself the other day. It wasn't from Gunsford. It's called Cortinas. That doesn't compare to Costco pizza. What's that? That doesn't compare to Costco pizza. Everything good? Huh? Everything good? I think so. Yeah? Sorry. Yeah. What about you? Tired. I had an emergency last night. I had to take a Benadryl. Benadryl kills me for this today. I am just so dead. So I feel like I'm drugs or something. Hey, we're gonna get ready to play like that. Yes. How did that feel, brother? We all know that feeling, right? That was good. Just kidding. Yeah. It's gonna be a long day. Yeah. got here. Yeah, you do this. Chad, you do this part.
Do what?
This part.
Oh, sure. Why not?
You got all the equipment.
Yeah, I'd have to learn a lot of equipment.
One camera, and that's it.
Oh, no sound?
It's on the mic, it's on the camera.
That's not bad. Well, if they decide they want to pay you, boy, yeah.
That's probably not gonna happen.
I know. It'd be a stern high five.
You're going,
Encouragement.
yeah, you're going, but it doesn't pay my bills.
Affirmations is what I pay my bills with.
You're going, no, it doesn't.
I will think it's happy.